What is up, you guys, and welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, my name's Mackenzie and I'm an artist. I'm mostly a stained glass artist, but I like to dabble in almost everything. And if you're not new here, thank you for coming back. So just jumping right into it, today's video is going to be something super easy, but I don't think many people realize how easy it is and convenient. So today's video is going to be what to do with your old, dried out, dying flowers. And I figured it's a perfect time because Valentine's Day just passed and that's where these are from, and I don't like to throw away any of my flowers. I have a ton of bundles hanging up behind you, which I'll show you guys in a second. So yeah, we're gonna take these roses, hang them upside down, dry them, wrap them up, make them look nice and pretty. So if that sounds interesting, let's go. Okay, so I figured I would show you a couple of my older dried bundles and what they look like when they're finished. They still retain quite a bit of that red rose color, but it just adds something pretty to the room. And this is another one. These were yellow and red roses. So this is hopefully what our finished product will look like. So let's get wrapping. Okay guys, so as always, really quick, first thing I'm gonna do is go over everything you're going to need to be able to hang these upside down. So paper towels, because it's gonna make a mess. Obviously, once you're pulling your roses or flowers out of your vase, they're gonna be wet and soaked, and we're gonna need to trim all the extra leaves off, any dead stuff. So you're gonna need paper towels, scissors, you're gonna need floral wire. So this is basically just a very pliable, thin wire you can find at any craft store, Michael's, Joann's, and it's literally just called florist wire. It comes in green, silver, black, whatever color you need. It's pretty cheap. Of course, I'll link everything I can find down below. And then again, you're gonna need florist ribbon. So this is basically a lightly sticky ribbon that you can wrap around the base of your bundle of flowers, and it's got a little bit of stick and a little bit of stretch, so you can get a nice good tight wrap around your base. Of course you could use something like ribbon, but I do believe this is specifically made for flowers and flower bundles for a reason. It's just easiest to use what's actually meant for this specific purpose. So these you don't need, but I'm going to use these just to add a little bit of extra something once I have everything wrapped up. And they're just clear iridescent beads, which, like I said, once we have everything wrapped up in the end, I might add a few of these pieces randomly throughout our flower bundle. So again, you don't need them, but it's just something extra. You're gonna need wire cutters for your flower wire or your florist wire. Then you're gonna need a hot glue gun, glue sticks. And again, this is optional, but I do think it adds a little something extra. The video you just saw, you saw on one of my bundles, I had a little bit of white mesh around the outside of the flowers. So if you have any extra fabric, preferably something see-through or lace, if you wanna add something extra around the actual flowers, it kinda helps protect them, and it just gives it a pretty look when you can wrap something like this around the top of your flowers. So I've got this extra fabric, and I have a little bit of this, which is a spider web, and I'm a dark bitch, so I'm not sure which one I'm gonna use yet, if I'm gonna use the spiders or just the plain black mesh. Okay, so now that we know everything we're gonna need, the first thing we need to do is prep our flowers. So I'm just going to lay down a few pieces of paper towel and pull out all my flowers. Okay, so besides just cutting off or recutting the dead ends off of these stems, you do kind of want to get rid of the majority of the dead leaves and bulk that's within your flower bunch. So I'm gonna cut most of these leaves on. I might leave one or two on a few of the roses just like this. So I'm going to really get rid of the bulk of what's in here for green. So this one's gonna be no good. See how that tip is brown? That's just gonna end up snapping right off anyway in no time, so get rid of ones like this. They're just gonna end up falling apart once they do dry. Same thing with this. This one's got no baby's breath flowers left on it anyway. This one's rotted. That's gotta go. Perfect. And it's just got one leaf, so we'll keep him. And I'm just gonna go through the rest of the bunch, getting rid of any dead flowers and cutting them to the exact size I want. All right, so before I start wrapping any of them, we do need to make sure that they are as dry as we can get them. That way our flower or floral wire and ribbon are going to stick well to the branches. So I'm just gonna take one sheet of paper towel and kind of go through and pinch the ends of the stems, making sure that they're as dry as we can get them before we start wrapping. All right, so these are as dry as we're gonna get them. Now what we're gonna do is basically place our rose bundle exactly how we want it to lay. So like I mentioned earlier, I cut some stems a little bit shorter than others. That way they all lay together nicely and they're not just bunched up against each other. So do you see what I mean by that? Some are shorter, some are taller. So it's a nice bundle of flowers. It's hard to see when they're this dark since they're kind of wilted already. Okay, so you can kind of get a feel for how many stems and leaves you're gonna need, because some are just getting in the way. It's going to be easier to pluck those off if they're just jammed in the center anyway. Okay, so I think I like the way that this looks. I like the flowers just as they are, so before I try to fit the baby's breath in there as well, I am going to quickly take some of that floral wire and give it just a couple wraps around so it's mostly held in place. And then we can worry about the baby's breath. Okay, so as you guys can kind of see here, even though the florist wire is green, it does still stick out or stand out quite a bit. So even though that's going to be mostly covered in floral ribbon, you still want to make it as neat and as pretty as you can get it, because that is going to make it tricky to cover with the floral ribbon or just regular ribbon once we get to that spot. So you do kind of want to try to make it as neat and as pretty as you can get it. Again, this is just a kind of a placeholder while we're figuring out where we want our baby's breath and everything else to sit. So I'm happy with the way that these look. Now I'm going to go in and place my baby's breath. So these, this one's obviously dead. We gotta get rid of that little piece. These are gonna have to sit a lot higher because it's got no stem left. So I'm just going to try to smush it into the wire that I've already placed, keeping it nice and high up. And I'm going to wrap that very bottom end with more floral wire before I go in with the rest of it, because the less you have to handle at once, the easier it's gonna be. So I'm just gonna unravel some of this wire and keeping it as low as I can, I'm going to wrap it around the bottom of that baby's breath, because you don't want to have to bring both your floral wire and ribbon all the way up to the top of your stems. I think it looks prettiest when you have maybe just the bottom half covered and you can still see quite a bit of stem left. Again, it doesn't really matter. Most of this is going to be covered anyway, especially if you're using something like a fabric after. But still, you want it to look as neat as you can get it. Now that's definitely as high as I want to go with that floral ribbon or floral wire, because I don't want to have to go any higher with my ribbon. So I know this is as high as I can go with my wire. So I've got baby's breath on this side. I think I'm going to cut the rest of my piece in half. That way I can kind of spread it out a little bit further. Okay, so we are already finished with the wire wrapping. I like the way that this looks. It's a good even amount of baby's breath around all sides of our floral bundle here. I think this side will be the back side, so whether that means this is up against a wall or just not facing in the forward direction wherever I place it. So I do really like the way that this looks. And again, I've got roses down at the bottom, some shorter, some taller. So no matter how you look at it, you're going to see a face of a rose. So now we can go back in and we can trim all of our stems to make them as even as possible. All right, so I think that is good enough. I might end up snipping this thicker one because this is gonna make it tricky to really wrap it nice and tight in the floral ribbon. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is take our floral ribbon, and you do want it to have a bit of grip, because it will stick to itself. But the first thing I'm gonna do is kind of weave my floral ribbon in the very middle of all of those stems. That's gonna kind of help give it something to hold on to when I start pulling really tight on it, because it is sticky, but it's not sticky enough where it instantly grabs onto itself. So I kind of weave it through the middle and run my ribbon back over that edge so it doesn't start to slip. And now you can start pulling really tight. And all you're doing is covering all of this stem and all of your floral wire so it looks neat and pretty. So you want to keep a nice firm grip. You want to pull tight, but you don't want to pull tight enough where you're going to be warping the ribbon or breaking it. I'm going to pull as tight as I can, going almost to the very end. You could wrap it around all the way on the end if you want to, but it's going to be covered anyway, so I think it's a waste of ribbon to go over it and then re-wrap around. So I'm just going around the base, keeping it nice and tight, and I'm gonna go all the way up until all of my floral wire is covered. Okay, now we're at the end. It's not gonna stick on its own, so we're going to have to stick it down with something. So I'm kind of pushing that in with my fingers, and it kind of molds itself together. So the end is right here, and I'm just kind of mushing it together, but I am going to hit the end of that with a bit of glue so it does not come apart. Okay, so while I have my glue gun heating up, I am going to pull out those beads I had showed you guys earlier to see if I can incorporate these into these flowers somehow. I was thinking I would like it, since they'll be hanging upside down, if I could. I suppose I could have just wire wrapped them in. If I can get them to kind of hang alongside the flower like that, or maybe even just one strand here and there, so when it hangs upside down, it will look like that, just a little bit of beads, but I'm not sure. Okay, so what I think I'm going to do is take a bit of hot glue and kind of just place these beads into the hot glue and then wrap it in floral wire. I'm not sure if that's, or not floral wire, the floral ribbon. I think I might have just enough left. I don't want to have to open up another roll. All right, let me grab our glue gun. Okay, I've got my little mini glue gun here. Is it ready yet? Okay, it's ready. So, I'm just gonna do one tiny little 1/4-inch glue dot and push those beads into the glue. And you gotta kind of hold it and wait for it to dry. I'm lucky I've got these nails so I can push it right into the glue. Can you guys even see that good enough? All right, so now I'm gonna go to the next one. Push a little bit of glue down. I'm trying to weave the beads through so they don't just look like they were a last minute thought. So now they're kind of on the inside of the bundle of flowers. And then just pushing those beads lightly into that hot glue bead. Okay, now the last thing we need to do, the whole reason we brought the whole glue gun out in the first place, is close off the very end of our ribbon. So again, I've got my nail here, so this isn't gonna burn me. Obviously you could not touch this with the tip of your finger, but I'm just gonna kind of smush that ribbon and hot glue together and into place. That way it's not a huge bulky glob of glue and it kind of just blends in. And let that dry. Okay, so last step here is again wrapping these edges of the beads in floral wire. Okay, so I think I actually kind of like how it looks with a bit of the beads hanging out here. So I'm just gonna finish it right where I'm at and close it off with some hot glue again. Okay, so now that we've got everything wrapped, we've got our beads in there, everything is nice and secure. I'm just gonna kind of loosely place them into the actual flowers themselves so they don't really move too much. And now what I'm gonna try to do is figure out how I want to place my black mesh fabric around them. So of course you don't want to cover all of your flowers. I've already kind of cut this piece into a triangle shape. That way when I actually roll the roses up, it's already kind of in the shape we need it to be. So the first thing we need to do is figure out how much extra fabric we've got to cut off. So again, kind of making sure my beads are placed loosely where I want them to be. You don't want them to end up falling back up the rose bush. So I'm gonna kind of pull this down and loosely figure out how much extra fabric we're gonna have to cut off. All right, so I'd say we can snip all of this here. So to kind of just hold it in place, I'm gonna push some hot glue in there. I'm putting a pretty big glob down there. Again, you've got to be careful. If you don't got super long nails like this, you're gonna burn the crap out of your fingers. So I just put a nice big glob of hot glue underneath this bunch. And essentially, I'm just gluing down the fabric to hold everything in place. All right, so I've got this little extra bit of beads here, the matching beads that I put on the inside. And I'm going to glue these in place right where I pinched the fabric together and glued it down. I'm just pushing a little bit of hot glue up against the beads. And I'm pushing the hot glue into the fabric at the same time. So it's got something to hold on. It's being pushed through the fabric onto the actual flowers and base. Okay, so now that I like the way it looks, it's nice and pretty. I've added all my decorations. Now we need to figure out how we're gonna hang it. Okay, so again, same thing here, florist wire. This stuff is just silver. Depending on if you've got white walls or wherever you're gonna hang it, the wire doesn't really matter. It's not going to be super visible anyway. Is basically let the end of the wire do the work, and I'm going to try to stick it in and poke it through the very end of our flowers. So this isn't just going through the fabric, this is now gone inside the actual floral ribbon itself. So this has got a good hang, that's not gonna go anywhere. And all I'm gonna do is cut it so I've got about 5 inches on each end and make a hanging loop. Bend the tip down and then twist it together, that way you don't get stabbed by the end of the wire. And that is pretty much it. You've got your little hanging wire, you've got your pretty dried roses. Now we can hang them up. Okay guys, here are our pretty hanging, soon to be dried flowers. Now depending on where you live, how humid it is, etc., will dictate when these are actually going to fully dry out. But it won't take too long, and all you have to do is hang them upside down like they are already ready to do. You've got your hanging wire up here, you can hook it anywhere, it doesn't need to be in the sun or in the shade, doesn't matter. They will dry anywhere. I think they came out really pretty. I don't know why I like adding fabric like this to the outside of them, maybe because it looks almost bridal, so it seems more special, I'm not sure. But you can see our little hints of iridescent beads within here. It looks really, really pretty. So I am going to hang them right in the middle of my other two I've got on my front windows here. I'll show you what that looks like. And I think that's it for today's video, guys. So as always, thank you so much for watching. I know today's video was again very different, not stained glass, but I hope you still enjoyed it nonetheless. I hope it was entertaining and informational. As always, I'll link everything I can down below. So any materials I used in this video that I can find online, I will link down below. Of course, I'm also going to link my Instagram and my Etsy, so if you want to see my stained glass work and my stained glass business, go check me out over there. And if not, I'll see you next time. Bye.